Hi, this is Saurav. Today I'm going to talk about bringing SAP Ariba data into SAP Datasphere. This is the video section of the tutorial or the blog that you just read through. So this will help you in exploring the blog in a more visual way, and that will help your understanding. So let's begin. The first step of this process is to explore what data you would like to bring into SAP Datasphere. So exploring SAP Ariba is our first step. So let's go into the system and see what I did for this proof of concept for this implementation. So I'm using SAP Business Accelerator Hub for finding the SAP Ariba APIs that I can use. And for this purpose, I selected Ariba Network Purchase Orders Buyer API. And if you go into the model view, I'm just focusing on these two items, models, order header and order item or order line item. So within this order header model, I'm selecting a few fields, for example, document number, vendor ID, customer name, PO amount, and so on. And similarly, from order items, I'm selecting quantity and so on. All right. Now, one of the important things before we start using the Ariba API is to get the API key. And if you are having an account, if you have an account, an SAP One account, you can log in, and then if you click on show API key, you get the key, and you can copy that key for using it within your application. You can also try it out here. You just click on run, you get the response from the API. And if you look into what the request look like, these are all the possible parameters that can be used with the call, with the API call. And with my account, it sent the Ariba network ID and then the API key, which is very unique to myself. So using these parameters of your own, you can also try this out. So for now, please keep these for your reference. Okay, now let's go back to the presentation. Briefly, a brief about how this integration overall looks like, or the solution overview looks like. So we have SAP Ariba, and we are utilizing REST API for Ariba Business Network Purchase Order Buyer API that we just saw. So this is consumed, the RESTful API is consumed within the CAP application running in the Business Application Studio. What the CAP application does is it makes a call to that API and filters the field that I need from the header model and the item model. And once those responses are filtered, I then write it into HANA Cloud. The HANA Cloud is the persistency layer here. And once the data is persisted on HANA Cloud, it is then consumed by SAP Datasphere to create analytical models in SAP Datasphere, which are then exposed for consumption for reporting in SAP Analytics Cloud. So this is how the overall flow looks like, and the system since this is an SAP to SAP integration, the single sign-on or cloud identity services from SAP ID takes care of authentication when I make a call to the Ariba APIs, as well as consume the data within CAP, then processing in HANA Cloud, and consumption further in Datasphere or SAP Analytics Cloud. So this is the overall flow of this solution. As a next step, we will go into the implementation part of the CAP application, which are then divided into two parts. One is HANA Cloud used as a sidecar scenario, and then HANA Cloud the HANA Cloud underneath SAP Datasphere used as the persistence layer. We will now focus on the implementation of this CAP application, and for that I am right now logged into the SAP Business Application Studio. This is the first scenario where HANA Cloud is used as a sidecar instance for implementation of the CAP application. The HANA Cloud thus used as a sidecar instance should then be connected manually with SAP Datasphere instance with the credentials from the HANA Cloud. And once that is done, Datasphere can consume the HANA Cloud remote tables for modeling and then for further consumption of the data. As a first step, we have to clone from Git, and for that I navigate to the Git repository, which is included in the blog, and then copy the Git URL. Once I do that, I click on enter and open the repository in my Business Application Studio. So the Git repository has been cloned into my local dev environment, and the first thing that I need to do is configure the package before I can start deploying it in my business technology platform sub-account. But before that, let's quickly explore what this application basically does. So this application is divided into the database module, which is responsible for creation of the orders table, the items table, and also provisioning these orders and items data as a service endpoint through the service module. And the service module basically does that. There is an order header service, there is an order item service, which is based on the orders and the item entities. And then there is the actual integration of or implementation of the ETL logic. This is the JavaScript which is responsible for making a call to the Ariba network, Ariba API, making use of the Ariba network ID API key, processing the response, parsing the response, and then inserting or upserting the data into the DB module and into the database. Besides this, the application has been written with an interval option to ping the API every 5 seconds to get any changes that may have been generated on the source system, that is the Ariba system, in that interval of 5 seconds. This can of course be modified depending on the use case, depending on the requirement. This can also be chosen to be removed, and some kind of scheduling mechanism can be also used for running this service, that is making a call to the API depending on the business requirement. The scheduling can be also done from the BTP itself, but that is not covered as a part of this demonstration. All right. Now, having explored what my project includes, the next step for me would be to go to the terminal, and within this terminal, I would need to install a few dependencies, and for that, and these dependencies are the requirements, are the files or the Node.js modules that the project would need for itself to run. And for that, I just need to run the command npm I or npm install and it brings in all the necessary files required for this project. Once the installation of the dependencies are complete, the next step for us would be to build the project locally. When we build the project locally, it generates the required artifacts to interact with the persistency layer, that is HANA Cloud. So let's just do that. So as you can see, there are a lot of generated files, out of which the most two important ones are of type HDV table, and we can see the order table and item table has been generated, and this is something which we will need to verify later on in the database itself. So once the deployment has been done, once the building has been done, the next step would be to deploy, and for that the command would be cds deploy, and it will take and yeah, it failed to deploy because there is no active session between the business application studio and the BTP account in the backend. So for that, the first step would be to set up or log in to the specified BTP account and the space associated with it. So to log in, you just need to run cf login sso, and once you do that, you need to authenticate yourself. And once you are authenticated, choose the space that you would like to deploy or that you would like to connect to. And once you are connected, you are good to deploy. So let me clear the screen for you and run the deployment. So as you can see, the deployment has been successful, and this is a local deployment, meaning there is no service. By doing this process, it does not deploy as a service or an application on the BTP account, but rather creates the required artifacts like the HDI container, the HDB tables, and so on. In order to deploy it as an application, I choose to do the mtar, that is the archive file generated out of multi-target application feature, which I will demonstrate in a few seconds. But let's test the local deployment or the local application first. So the command to run the application which was locally deployed is cds watch profile hybrid. If I click on enter, it should make the application available locally on the local host with port 4004. So let's click on this, and it brings up the application. So the service module of the CAP application is providing the orders service and the items service, as you can see, which are interacting with the HANA Cloud instance via the DB modules of the DB module of the CAP application. So let's look into the order. So what has happened when I click that is it made an API call for the header model and brought the data as I had programmed: vendor ID, document number, customer number, supplier name, unit org, and PO amount. And what it also did was persisted this data into HANA Cloud. Then similarly, items, I'm fetching document number and quantity. Now that the local test has been successful, I will just stop it and close the testing session. And the next step for me would be to verify if the data has been persisted on the HANA Cloud instance. So let's do that. So I need to log into HANA Database Explorer to explore the data that is available, that got persisted right now with this local test. So for that, first I need to add the instance or the HDI container into my Explorer. First select HDI container from the instance type and look for the HDI container. Sometimes it's already available. I think I can look at HDI. It's on the same space that I had selected in the previous steps. Give it some time. This is the new container that I just added. This one is from the previous instance. Let me remove it from here just for the sake of clarity. Let's give it some time. It generally takes a few minutes for itself to configure and be ready. Yeah, now this HDI container has been added to the Database Explorer and I can start exploring the tables. Let's go to the tables and I can see there are two tables generated, items and orders, and let's see if there is data. Let's check for items data first. Yeah, I can see the document number and quantity. And let's check the orders data. Similarly, the orders data is also persisted and we can see it from here. So this all looks good. And with that, let's go to the next section, which is connecting the HANA Cloud instance with the Datasphere. And for that, I need to go to the Datasphere account and log in. I'm logged into the Datasphere account, and the first thing that I need to do is create a space. I have already created a space for myself. You have to go to the option to create. Give the space name and so on, and a few other details. As soon as you do that, you can go to the space that you had already created. Let me go to my space, which is also Ariba test. And just to show you how it looks like. Yeah. So my space looks fine. So next step would be to check for connections. I don't have any connections. And to make a connection to the HDI container, which has those tables, I first need the details. And this is where the instance ID, in fact, the host name would be essential. So let's go to the view credentials section, go to the form tab and copy and use it for our next steps. So keep this open, go to the space again, Datasphere again, create a new connection. The type should be SAP HANA. Category is cloud. This is where the host name is necessary. So let me copy that host name, host, port, as well as user and password. Port would be 443. Username. So we have to select a runtime user, which is generally ending with the letters R and T. Copy that. And the password would be this. leaving everything as standard, unchanged. Let me go to the next step. Let me put it as Ariba sidecar and create a connection. The connection is created. Let me validate. Is valid. So my connection is both created as well as valid. Now that means the data sphere can connect to the sidecar HANA cloud instance for consuming the remote tables, that is item table, order table, and then create models, analytical models on top of those. So for that, let me go to data builder in Datasphere, select new graphical view and select sources, select connections, and I have my connection sidecar, and I should also have those tables under one of these directories. So let's explore. Yes. So I will create a graphical view using the tables items and orders. So let me drag items on the right side of the panel. So I will put this as a sidecar identifier. As you can see, as soon as I dragged it to the right, it tried to create a local table in Datasphere. Similarly, I will also drag the orders table and drop it on top of the items table. Also suffix it with SC to identify sidecar. So there is an inner join between the item table and the order table, document number being the common key. And I can see a message already that it has been imported. Sorry, it has been, yes, it has been imported. So next step would be to deploy it. But before deploying this model, let me check if I have access to the data, if I can see the data already. Oops. Yes. So I have the data from the view, which is created by creating an inner join between the two tables. It's a very straightforward view. And then the next step for me would be to expose this data or this model for consumption in the analytics cloud. So for that, what I will do is I will try to create an analytical data set. And I'm doing this just for the sake of time. But this data set is already deprecated. The next step for you to do would be ideally to create an analytical model on top of this graphical views, and then that analytical model gets exposed. But for the sake of understanding, let's just use this for an example right now. And I would have to assign a few measures, which are quantity and then amount, and try to deploy this graphical view first. So yeah, that's the message is analytical models are now the preferred way. Analytical data sets are deprecated. So let's deploy it anyways and give it a name, view underscore, let's be more precise, Ariba view sidecar, and save it. We should get the status deployed. Let's give it a few moments. Yes, the deployment was successful, and with that, I can now basically find this analytical view, which was actually a graphical view in SAC, SAP Analytics Cloud. And for that, let's check. Let's go to Analytics Cloud. Now, I can quickly switch to Analytics Cloud from this tab, quite convenient. Let's go to Analytics Cloud. Let's go to Data Analyzer. Let's go to find an existing model. SAP DWC as my Datasphere instance name. Then my Datasphere space and this view, as you can see, which you just created. So if I click on this, I can see the data in Analytics Cloud as well. So let me click on all the fields, drag the rows, and create a report. I can deploy this as an application, which I will not do for this tutorial, but you get the idea that the data from Ariba processed by the CAP application and written into HANA Cloud as a sidecar instance, consumed by HANA Cloud, consumed by Datasphere is now available on SAP Analytics Cloud. And with the scheduling I mentioned, the data can be brought in as scheduled and can be analyzed frequently. One important aspect that I did not mention is that everything has been done locally so far. Because now if I don't have the application running, I don't have the service running. I had closed the session. There is no local application running on local host right now. What do I do now? So for that, I need to deploy it as an application. And for that, the first step that I need to do, go back to Business Application Studio, open a terminal. Here, I need to create the mtar file. And for that, I have to write the command mbt build. And it will build an archive file, which can then be deployed into as an application into your business technology account. I had done this before as a part of my test. I will just redo it for the sake of this tutorial. So the mtar file has been built. This is Ariba to HC underscore 1.00 mtar. And I just have to right click on this file and deploy it as, deploy empty archive. Select the option deploy empty archive. Let's see how the deployment goes. The deployment of the mtar file is now successful. Let's verify this going back to the business BTP cockpit and see in the list of services. So you need to go to your space and then go to applications. And as you can see, my application has started. Just let's go into the application and click on the application URL. And if I go there, I can still get my orders data as well as the items data, just like I got them at the local test. That completes the first scenario A, HANA Cloud used as sidecar. Now we will jump into the next section, which is HANA Cloud underneath SAP Datasphere used as the persistency layer. So that's the main difference between scenario A and scenario B. Generally, the scenario B is true when the data sphere and the business technology platform are at the same data center. So we are for scenario B, what we are doing is we are enabling this SAP SQL data warehousing on our Datasphere tenant, and um, the requirement is the Datasphere tenant and the business technology platform organization and space must be in the same data center. So if that is true, then we can use scenario B. And this is a rather simpler architecture, does not require manual connections, and objects or data can be written or exchanged quite conveniently with this approach between Datasphere and the BTP account and the services associated with it. So let's go through the prerequisites first, or a few steps before we go into the implementation part of it. So this is the flow that we are trying to achieve. There is a business application studio, there is an HDI container, and there is a data sphere space. Um, we don't have a calculation view in our example, but we have a CAP application, which is responsible for the extraction transformation of the SAP Ariba data. But in order to complete this flow, there are a few prerequisites that we need to establish first. And the first thing being connecting the data sphere space with the business technology studio or the Datasphere tenant with the business application studio, and this has to be done through a SAP support mechanism. You have to raise an SAP ticket to map the database ID of your database Datasphere tenant, the HANA Cloud ID of the database of the Datasphere tenant, that should be connected or matched to the business technology platform ID, the org ID, the space ID, and so on. The details about this is shared in a blog by my colleague Cristiano. I have also referenced this blog in the current tutorial document on blog. You can go through the blog, look into this video and description to know what steps exactly are necessary, what are the fields, how to raise ticket, and so on. So this scenario B takes into account that these steps have been already implemented, meaning the BTP account space is linked to the database ID of the HANA Cloud, which is underneath SAP Datasphere. So with that assumption, let's proceed to the next step. The next step is again going to my business application studio and then replicating a new Git repository into it. So let's do that. So I have opened a new window in Business Application Studio. Then I would clone the Git repository. Copy. Open the clone repository. Okay. Uh, First, let's do the usual steps. That is install, navigate to the project. Yeah, install the dependencies. And build. Next step is build the project. But before that, I just wanted to show you some differences here in this flow versus the first flow. Since we are trying to share the common HDI container by using the SAP SQL data warehousing on the Datasphere tenant. What we have to do is we have to keep in mind a few things. So let's go to exchanging data with SAP SQL data warehousing. So this is exactly the flow that we would like to do. And then if you look into the documentation, add an HDI container and access its objects in your space. And within that, we have to go to the space management, the HDI container, add an unassigned HDI containers, and so on. But even before that, there are a few permissions and roles that authorizations rather required that the CAP project must have to be successfully configured for exchanging the data. And those are, we have to assign manually roles like DWC consumption role and DWC consumption role with grant option in the container to allow you to add in your space and allow you to exchange data between the container and the space. So these two roles need to be manually assigned, and there is in the documentation the role template has been provided as a JSON document. I will utilize this in my implementation. So let's go to the Business Application Studio and try to find the roles. Under the DB module, there is a configuration folder, and here I have mentioned these two roles. One is consumption role and one is consumption role with grant option. Without these, this integration would not work. So this is absolutely mandatory for these two roles to be implemented for this project. Go to my Datasphere account. Go to the space. I'm doing the steps exactly from the help documentation. The first step that we need to do is add a database user. So first create a database user and then enable the read access with grant option, enable HDI consumption, enable write access, and create it. Once this is created, I need to deploy it. Before deploying, let me deploy the space to access user details. So let me deploy it. It will take a moment. The space is deployed with the new database user. Now I need the credentials of this database. So this database user is the one that is responsible for the OpenSQL schema. Now let's copy these details. I'll request a new password and copy the full credentials. Copy full credentials. Just copy it. Okay. With that, I'll just navigate to my BTP cockpit, and here under the space, I need to be on the space that is connected to the BTP to the Datasphere instance. So I need to navigate to the correct space, then go to instances, then create user provided service. Let's say Ariba test, or just copy the paste the information from Datasphere here and put the name from here. Copy this name. Sorry. Copy this name and put it into the instance name. Yeah. Create. Okay. Let's see if my UPS has been created. Yes. So once my UPS user provided service is created, the next step for me is to go back to my business application studio and the uh, build the project. And next step after the build was successful, is to deploy it. So either I can do it a local deployment like before and test it, but this time I would prefer to build the mtar file first and then deploy it as an application directly. So let me do mbt build, and then I will deploy it as I can either deploy. So I go to the empty archive file, right click and say deploy empty archive, or I can do copy the path, do cf deploy and paste the path, and it will start deploying. The deployment has successfully completed. Now let's check the deployed application on our business technology platform account and just run the application. So as you can see, Ariba to DSP underscore SR dash SRB is my application. Let's try to run a quick test. This is my application URL. If I need to get the orders, yes, I get the orders and the items. I get the items. Next step for me would be to check in the, the database explorer. So let's go back to the step where we add the instance. So choose HDI container and look for look for the DB. This is the right one. Let's do that. It will take a moment. Let's refresh and give it some time for it to configure. Usually takes some time. After some time, this is now ready to be used, and if I navigate to the tables, I see the same tables, items and orders. Let's check for data. I have the items data. Let's check for this orders data. They are available as well. So this is good. We have persisted the Ariba data in the HANA cloud, which is underneath the Datasphere. Now the next step would be to model the data just like before in Datasphere, like creating a graphical view. But before that, we have to connect the HDI container to the Datasphere space. That is what I'm going to demonstrate now. Let's first take into account the MTA YAML file and look for the schema Ariba DSP. So this would be available as an HDI container in my Datasphere space. So as a next step in the preparation of Datasphere for this purpose of using the underlying HANA cloud, I have to add the HDI container. So let's go to add button and then look for my HDI container. So Ariba DSP. So if I can see that already, which was recently created, I will just add it. Now with that, I should be able to consume the objects within this HDI container slash schema in my Datasphere modeling tools. So, but before that I have to deploy. So let's deploy. The deployment was successful. Now that we have added the container to this data sphere space, for the next step for us is to start utilizing the modeling tools to create a analytical model for consumption in SAP Analytics Cloud. So for that, let me go to Data Builder and choose New Graphical View, just like the last time. Go to Sources. And this time, instead of utilizing the Connections tab, I already see that my schema or the API container is now available for consumption. So I will just copy this like the last time, deploy. Similarly, drag orders. Deploy. Now let's check the data. There is data. And same as the last time, let's do this. Select the measures. Try to deploy it. Yeah, the same message. Analytical data set is deprecated. Choose analytics model. Just to save us time, I'm directly creating this analytical data set instead. Deploy it. Save. The deployment was successful, and now let's navigate to Analytics Cloud, but also keep in mind the name of it, Ariba HC DSP. Let's go to Analytics Cloud. Let's go to Data Analyzer, existing model, space, and yes, I see my second entry, which is the view that I created on top of the tables written into the common HDI container. So this looks fine as well. So with that, I have come to the end of this presentation. In summary, I demonstrated the integration of Ariba API, where I utilized my cloud application programming model based Node.js application, which makes call to this API periodically, and then the application parses the data, then writes the data into HANA Cloud, and from HANA Cloud, this data is available in Datasphere and Analytics Cloud. Depending on different business requirements, there is an option to integrate to a sidecar HANA Cloud or a HANA Cloud underneath the Datasphere, provided the BTP and the Datasphere are on the same data center. So both approaches were successfully demonstrated, and both the applications are up and running on the BTP account. These applications can also be scheduled using a scheduler, but this is beyond the scope of this demonstration. But many options exist, and the biggest option is the data is in HANA Cloud. We have BTP via Business Application Studio integrated to the HANA Cloud, and that opens up a huge potential of utilizing different business technology platform services from no code, low code to analyzing the persisted data for any artificial intelligence use cases using machine learning algorithms and so on and so forth to further process the data within the SAP stack and make it available for consumption on the analytical layer provided by Analytics Cloud. With that, I would like to stop my presentation. I hope you liked it. Please leave any comments or questions if you have. We would be glad to assist you on that. Thank you very much.